I mean, it was just a wonderful way of getting to know them, you know, as you say, bonding, sitting on the end of their bed and just reading. You know, we took it in turns to find our favourite stories. And what's lovely, it's really got them reading. I mean, properly reading. They are bookworms now.
When Queen Camilla stepped into the diplomatic reception, jaws dropped. There, glittering on her head, was Princess Eugenie's wedding tiara. The Greville Emerald Kokoshnik, a piece we thought belonged to one royal, suddenly appeared on another. This wasn't supposed to happen. For decades, the British royals have followed strict rules about who wears what. But that night, everything changed. Is this the moment we've been waiting for? Are the vault doors finally opening? The recent diplomatic reception at Buckingham Palace brought an unexpected surprise that has royal watchers buzzing with excitement.
I didn't know that the issue of slavery within even a mile of my living is an issue. And I think that was so shocking in our own doorstep when you think it is a million miles away, that actually it's people every day who this is happening to.
Yeah.
Queen Camilla appeared wearing the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik Tiara, a piece that had previously been worn by Princess Eugenie at her wedding in 2018. This choice has sparked conversations about whether we might finally see a shift in how the British royal family approaches their extensive tiara collection. For those who follow royal fashion closely, this moment feels significant. The British royal family possesses one of the most impressive collections of tiaras in the world, yet these pieces are rarely seen in public. Unlike other European royal families, the British have maintained a rather conservative approach to how these precious items are distributed and worn. Most working members of the royal family are limited to just one or two pieces that they wear repeatedly at formal events. The Greville Emerald Kokoshnik Tiara itself has quite an interesting background. Before Princess Eugenie wore it at her wedding, most people had no idea this particular piece even existed. It had been sitting in the royal vault, completely hidden from public view. The tiara features a striking Kokoshnik design, which is a traditional Russian style characterized by its tall, curved shape. The piece is set with emeralds and diamonds, creating a distinctive look that stands out from the more commonly seen tiaras in the British collection. The current system for tiara allocation in the British royal family is quite different from what you might expect. With the exception of the reigning queen, most members of the family do not actually own their tiaras. Instead, these pieces are loaned to them by the crown. This applies specifically to the main line of succession within the Windsor family. When someone like Catherine, Princess of Wales, wears a tiara to a state banquet or formal event, she is wearing a piece that has been lent to her, not one that she personally owns. This lending system has some historical roots. Queen Elizabeth II appeared to follow the example set by Queen Mary, her grandmother. Queen Mary's court operated on the principle that people wore what they were given. If someone lent you a piece of jewelry, you wore that piece and generally stuck with it. There was not much flexibility or opportunity to choose different items for different occasions. The Queen herself, of course, had access to the entire collection and could wear whatever she wished. But other family members were much more limited in their options. The restriction extends primarily to the direct line of succession. Families like the Kents and the Gloucesters, who are more distant relatives, have their own tiara situations and are not necessarily bound by the same rules. However, for the main working royals that the public sees most often, the selection has been remarkably consistent and, some would argue, predictable. This approach has created a situation where royal watchers can often guess which tiara will appear at any given event. When Catherine attends a state banquet, for example, there is a very high likelihood she will be wearing Queen Mary's lover's knot tiara. While this piece is undeniably beautiful and suits her well, seeing the same tiara repeatedly can become somewhat monotonous for those who follow these events closely. The British Royal Vault contains numerous spectacular pieces that rarely, if ever, see the light of day. There are tiaras with fascinating histories and stunning designs that remain locked away. The Strathmore Rose Tiara, for instance, had not been seen in public for many years before Catherine wore it to an event. Even then, the photographs from that occasion were not particularly clear, leaving many people hoping for another opportunity to see the piece properly displayed. Other pieces sitting in the collection include items like the Tech Crescent Tiara, various turquoise pieces, the Marie Feodorovna sapphire bandeau, and Queen Mary's bandeau. Each of these tiaras represents a piece of history and craftsmanship, yet they remain hidden away while the same few pieces appear again and again at public events. The question many people ask is why this system persists. Some argue that displaying too many valuable pieces might make the royal family appear excessively wealthy or out of touch. However, this argument has some logical flaws. These tiaras are not new purchases. Many of them are a century old or more. The money was spent generations ago. They are historical artifacts as much as they are pieces of jewelry. Keeping them locked in a vault does not change the fact that they exist or that they were once purchased. It simply means that no one gets to appreciate their beauty or historical significance. Furthermore, these pieces serve a ceremonial and diplomatic purpose. State banquets and formal receptions are occasions where such items are traditionally worn. They are part of the pageantry and tradition that many people, both in Britain and around the world, associate with the British monarchy. Using a wider variety of pieces from the collection would not necessarily suggest excess, but rather a celebration of history and heritage. The current situation means that an enormous collection of valuable and beautiful items sits unused. From a practical standpoint, this seems like a missed opportunity. These tiaras were created to be worn, to be seen, and to be part of important occasions. Instead, they remain in storage, serving no purpose at all. The appearance of the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik on Queen Camilla's head represents a deviation from the usual pattern. Princess Eugenie wore this tiara for her wedding, and under the traditional system, one might have expected it to become her tiara for any future formal occasions she might attend. However, Eugenie is not a working royal. She does not attend state banquets or represent the royal family at diplomatic receptions. The last time her sister Beatrice wore a tiara in public, she wore the York tiara, which belongs to their mother, Sarah Ferguson. This means the Greville Emerald was essentially available, sitting unused in the vault. Queen Camilla's decision to wear it suggests a more flexible approach might be developing. Perhaps the strict system of each person having their assigned tiara or two is beginning to relax. Perhaps there is a recognition that with such an extensive collection available, it makes sense to use more of. The timing of this choice is particularly interesting because it comes after a period where some observers thought they detected signs of change. Those signs ultimately did not lead to the broader shift that many had hoped for, which is why there is some caution about reading too much into this single instance. However, it does offer a glimmer of possibility that things might be different going forward. The system that governs tiara usage in the British royal family has its roots in practices established during earlier reigns, particularly under Queen Mary. She was known for her formidable presence and her very specific ideas about how the royal court should operate. Queen Mary believed in a hierarchical system where items were assigned to individuals based on their position and rank. Once something was given or lent to a person, that was generally what they would use for formal occasions. There was little room for variation or personal preference in this arrangement. Queen Elizabeth I, who was greatly influenced by her grandmother, appears to have maintained many of these same principles throughout her reign. While the late Queen herself had access to the entire royal collection and wore many different tiaras throughout her life, the same flexibility was not extended to other members of the family. This created a two-tier system where the sovereign enjoyed complete freedom of choice while everyone else worked within strict limitations. For someone like Catherine, Princess of Wales, this has meant wearing Queen Mary's Lover's Knot tiara to virtually every formal event that requires such an accessory. The tiara is certainly magnificent. It features 19 diamond arches, each topped with a pearl drop, and the overall effect is both elegant and regal. It suits Catherine's style perfectly and photographs beautifully. However, when you see the same piece at event after event, year after year, the initial impact begins to fade. What should be a moment of glamour and anticipation becomes predictable. The same pattern applies to other working royals. They each have their assigned pieces, and those are what appear time and time again. While consistency has its merits, it also means that the vast majority of the royal collection remains invisible to the public. For people who are interested in royal history, jewelry craftsmanship, or simply enjoy the pageantry of state occasions, this lack of variety becomes frustrating over time. there were moments in recent years when it seemed like this might be changing. The first significant hint came when Catherine wore the Strathmore Rose tiara to a formal event. This piece had not been seen in public for decades. It originally belonged to the Queen Mother and features a striking design with rose motifs created from diamonds. The appearance of this long hidden tiara generated considerable excitement among royal watchers. Unfortunately, the excitement was somewhat dampened by the quality of the photographs from that event. None of the images captured the tiara particularly well, making it difficult to fully appreciate the details of the piece. Many people were left hoping for another opportunity to see it worn, perhaps at an event with better lighting or camera angles. Nevertheless, the very fact that Catherine wore something different seemed to suggest that perhaps the old restrictions were loosening. This hope was reinforced later when Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, appeared wearing the lotus flower tiara. This piece had previously been worn by Catherine, which represented a departure from the usual practice. Under the traditional system, if Catherine had been assigned the lotus flower tiara, it would remain hers to wear. The fact that Sophie was now wearing it suggested that perhaps tiaras were being shared more freely among the working royals. There was an interesting detail that eagle-eyed observers noticed about Sophie's appearance in the lotus flower tiara. The piece still had the brunette velvet base that had been fitted for Catherine. Royal tiaras are typically fitted with a velvet or fabric-covered base that helps them sit securely on the wearer's head. This base is usually adjusted to match the wearer's hair color and head size. The fact that Sophie was wearing Catherine's base suggested that perhaps this was a relatively last-minute decision, without time to properly adjust the tiara for her. This detail sparked further speculation. If the tiara assignment had been changed quickly, did that mean the royals were starting to choose their tiaras closer to each event, rather than having permanent assignments? Other European royal families operate this way, with family members selecting from the available collection based on their outfit, the occasion, or simply personal preference. Perhaps the British royals were moving toward a similar system. The excitement continued when Queen Camilla wore the aquamarine ribbon tiara to a diplomatic reception. This particular piece had previously been associated with Sophie. It features aquamarines set in a ribbon-style design and is generally considered a lighter, less formal tiara compared to some of the grander pieces in the collection. The fact that Camilla chose to wear it seemed to confirm that the old boundaries were breaking down. Here was the Queen herself, wearing a tiara that had been worn by the Duchess of Edinburgh, while the Duchess was wearing a tiara previously worn by the Princess of Wales. It appeared that a rotating system might be developing, where pieces moved between family members based on availability and preference rather than rigid assignments. For those hoping to see more variety from the royal vault, these developments were tremendously encouraging. However, the optimism proved premature. As the rest of the year unfolded, things seemed to revert to the familiar pattern. Sophie returned to wearing her aquamarine necklace tiara, which had been her most frequently worn piece. This particular tiara was originally a necklace that was converted into a tiara, and while it is pretty, it is not considered one of the more impressive pieces in the collection. Seeing Sophie back in this tiara suggested that perhaps the lotus flower appearance had been an exception rather than a new rule. Catherine's subsequent appearances also followed the old pattern. When she attended formal events requiring a tiara, she wore the lover's knot. Twice she wore it, confirming that despite the brief appearance of the Strathmore Rose, her default piece remained unchanged. The lover's knot continued to be her go-to choice for state occasions. Queen Camilla's choices were similarly conservative. She wore the Belgian sapphire tiara twice. This piece features sapphires set in a diamond framework and is certainly beautiful, but seeing it repeated at multiple events brought back the sense of predictability that had characterized the previous system. The Belgian sapphire is a magnificent piece, but when it becomes the expected choice rather than one option among many, some of the magic is lost. By this point, it seemed clear that the changes observed earlier had not signaled a broader shift in policy. Instead, they appeared to be isolated instances, perhaps driven by specific circumstances or availability issues, rather than a deliberate decision to open up the collection. The traditional system remained in place, with each working royal sticking primarily to their assigned pieces. This return to the status quo was disappointing for anyone hoping to see more of the collection. The British Royal Vault contains tiaras that have not been seen in public for 50 years or more. Some pieces have fascinating historical connections, having been owned by various queens and princesses throughout European history. Others represent exceptional examples of jewelry craftsmanship from different eras. All of them remain locked away, gathering dust, while the same handful of tiaras appear repeatedly at public events. The situation raises questions about the purpose of maintaining such a collection if most of it is never used. These are not ordinary pieces of jewelry meant for private enjoyment. They are part of the official regalia of the monarchy, created and acquired specifically for ceremonial use. Their value lies not just in their materials, but in their historical significance and their role in royal tradition. Keeping them hidden seems to contradict their very purpose. The recent diplomatic reception brought a sudden shift that caught everyone's attention. Queen Camilla appeared wearing the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik Tiara, the same piece that Princess Eugenie had worn at her wedding. This choice immediately reignited conversations about whether the British royal family might finally be moving toward a more flexible approach with their tiara collection. After the disappointments of seeing the same pieces repeated throughout the year, this unexpected appearance of a different tiara felt significant. The choice is particularly interesting when you consider the practical aspects. Queen Camilla has access to numerous grand and impressive tiaras. She could have chosen the Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, which was one of Queen Elizabeth's favorites. She could have worn the Vladimir tiara with its dramatic emerald drops. She could have selected any number of large, statement pieces that would have been entirely appropriate for a diplomatic reception. Instead, she chose the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik, which is beautiful but relatively understated compared to some of the other options available to her. This decision suggests that Queen Camilla might be thinking about tiaras in a different way than her predecessors. Rather than always reaching for the most important or grandest pieces, she appears willing to explore different options from the collection. The Greville Emerald Kokoshnik is lovely and distinctive, but it does not carry the same weight of history as some of the other tiaras that have been worn by multiple queens over many decades. Choosing it indicates a certain freedom in approach. Some observers have suggested that this choice might have been intended as some sort of slight toward Princess Eugenie. This interpretation does not really hold up under scrutiny. Eugenie never owned the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik. It was lent to her for her wedding, just as tiaras are lent to other family members for their weddings. Once the wedding was over, the tiara went back into the royal vault. Eugenie has no particular claim to it beyond having worn it on one important occasion. Furthermore, Eugenie is not a working royal. She does not attend state banquets or diplomatic receptions. She has her own career and life outside of official royal duties. The last time either she or her sister Beatrice wore a tiara at a public event, Beatrice wore the York tiara that belongs to their mother. There is no indication that either sister expected to have continued use of tiaras from the royal collection for future events. Given their status as non-working royals, they simply would not have occasions that require such formal accessories. The more interesting question is what Queen Camilla's choice might signal about future possibilities. If she is willing to wear a tiara that was previously worn by another family member at a major event, does that mean other working royals might also have more flexibility? Could Catherine potentially wear a tiara that Camilla has worn? Or vice versa? Might Sophie have access to a wider range of pieces? These are the questions that make this moment feel potentially significant. What makes the situation particularly frustrating for those hoping for change is that the British royal family has such an enormous collection to work with. Conservative estimates suggest there are at least 20 significant tiaras in the royal vault, and the actual number might be considerably higher. Some of these pieces have not been photographed in decades. Others are known only from historical records and might not have been seen in public since the early 20th century. The potential for variety is enormous, yet it remains largely untapped. The contrast with other European royal families makes the British approach seem even more restrictive. Take the Swedish royal family as an example. They have a substantial tiara collection, though probably not quite as extensive as the British collection. However, the way they use their collection is completely different. At any given formal event, it is genuinely difficult to predict which tiaras will appear. The women in the family have access to most of the pieces, with only a few exceptions reserved specifically for the Queen or Crown Princess. Queen Sylvia of Sweden naturally has certain pieces that she wears most frequently and that are understood to be particularly associated with her. The same is true for Crown Princess Victoria, who often wears the Baden fringe tiara. This piece has become somewhat associated with the position of Crown Princess, as it was also worn by Queen Sylvia before she became queen. However, these associations are not rigid rules. Other family members have worn the Baden fringe on occasion, and both Sylvia and Victoria regularly wear other tiaras from the collection. Princess Madeleine of Sweden provides an excellent example of how the Swedish system works. In recent years, she wore the Edwardian ruby tiara to a formal event. This piece had been strongly associated with Queen Sylvia and was not something people expected to see on other family members. Yet there it was, looking magnificent on Madeleine. The appearance demonstrated that even pieces that seem to belong to specific individuals can be shared when the occasion calls for it. The Swedish collection includes numerous other pieces that rotate among the family members. There is the aquamarine Kokoshnik, which has been worn by several different women. Princess Madeleine has a modern fringe tiara that she personally owns, which adds another piece to the available options. The cameo tiara has been worn primarily by the Queen, but also appeared at Crown Princess Victoria's wedding. The amethyst tiara represents another option. Various button tiaras, though seen less frequently in recent years, remain part of the collection. The key point is that any woman in the family can potentially wear any of these pieces, depending on her preference and the specific occasion. This creates an element of surprise and anticipation around Swedish royal events. When a state banquet or formal occasion approaches, royal watchers genuinely do not know which tiaras will appear. Will Princess Sofia wear her wedding tiara again, or will she choose something different? Will Crown Princess Victoria stick with the Baden fringe, or select one of the other spectacular pieces available to her? This unpredictability adds interest and excitement to these events. The Dutch royal family operates with a similar philosophy. Queen Maxima and Princess Catharina Amalia have both worn the Dutch ruby Malario tiara, for instance. This piece is one of the most important in the Dutch collection, with a history stretching back to the 19th century. The fact that both the Queen and the Princess heir can wear it demonstrates a flexible approach. There is no sense that once someone wears a particular tiara, it becomes exclusively theirs. The Dutch are notably liberal with their sharing system, with some limited exceptions for pieces that are particularly associated with the monarch. The women in the family can choose from the available collection. This means that at any given event, there are multiple possibilities for which tiaras might appear. Like the Swedes, the Dutch create a sense of variety and interest around their formal occasions. Both the Swedish and Dutch approaches seem to recognize that these tiara collections exist to be used and enjoyed. They are part of the cultural heritage and ceremonial traditions of their respective monarchies. Keeping them locked away serves no particular purpose, while bringing them out for public occasions allows people to appreciate their beauty and historical significance. The rotating system also means that more pieces are regularly maintained and cared for, as items that are worn periodically require ongoing attention from jewelers and conservators. The British royal family could easily adopt a similar system. They have the collection to support it, certainly. The pieces are already there, already owned, already part of the royal heritage. It would not require any new purchases or expenditures. It would simply require a decision to be more flexible about who wears what and when. The infrastructure for maintaining and securing these pieces already exists. The only thing preventing more variety is policy and tradition. Queen Camilla's recent choice of the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik suggests that she might be open to this kind of change. By selecting a piece that had been worn by someone else at a memorable event, she demonstrated that such boundaries can be crossed. The question now is whether this single instance represents the beginning of a broader change, or whether it will turn out to be another isolated exception. There have been false starts before, moments when it seemed like the system might be opening up, only to revert back to the familiar pattern. This history of disappointment makes it difficult to get too excited about any single development, no matter how promising it might appear. That said, there are reasons to be cautiously optimistic. Queen Camilla wearing the Greville Emerald Kokoshnik is not quite the same as the previous hints of change. When Catherine wore the Strathmore Rose tiara, it was exciting, but it could be explained as simply adding another piece to her personal rotation. When Sophie wore the lotus flower tiara, it was interesting, but the evidence suggested it might have been a last-minute substitution rather than a deliberate policy shift. Queen Camilla's choice feels different because she already has established pieces that she wears regularly. She did not need to reach for something new. The fact that she chose to do so anyway suggests a more intentional decision. Another factor worth considering is that Queen Camilla selected a relatively low-profile piece for this diplomatic reception. She did not choose one of the most historically significant tiaras in the collection. She did not pick something that had been worn by Queen Elizabeth or Queen Mary at major state occasions. Instead, she chose a beautiful but less prominent piece that had most recently been associated with a non-working royal's wedding. This choice suggests a certain comfort with mixing things up and not always reaching for the most obvious or traditional options. If this approach continues, it could signal a meaningful shift into how the royal family thinks about their collection. Rather than treating each tiara as permanently assigned to a specific person, they might begin to view the collection as a shared resource that different family members can draw from as appropriate. This would not mean complete chaos or free-for-all access. There would still be certain pieces that are reserved for the monarch, and certain pieces that are particularly appropriate for the heir to the throne. However, beyond those core assignments, there could be much more flexibility and variety. The potential benefits of such a system are considerable. For the family members themselves, it would provide more options to coordinate their jewelry with different outfits and occasions. A tiara that works beautifully with one gown might not suit another as well. Having access to different pieces would allow for better matching and more polished overall appearances. It would also reduce the sense of monotony that must surely affect the royals themselves. Wearing the same tiara to every formal event for years on end cannot be particularly exciting, even if the tiara is magnificent. For the public and for royal watchers, more variety would make these formal occasions considerably more interesting. State banquets and diplomatic receptions would become opportunities to see different pieces from the collection, rather than predictable appearances of the same familiar tiaras. Each event would carry an element of anticipation and surprise. People might find themselves more engaged with these ceremonial occasions if there was genuine curiosity about which historical pieces might make an appearance. From a cultural and historical perspective, greater use of the collection would serve an educational purpose. Many of these tiaras have fascinating stories attached to them. They were created by renowned jewelers, owned by significant historical figures, or mark important moments in royal history. When they remain hidden in the vault, these stories cannot be told and appreciated. When they appear at public events, they provide opportunities to discuss history, craftsmanship, and heritage. They become teaching tools as well as beautiful accessories. There is also a practical argument for using the collection more extensively. These pieces require regular maintenance and care. Diamonds need to be checked to ensure they are secure in their settings. Metal needs to be cleaned and inspected for any signs of weakness or damage. This work is easier to justify and schedule when pieces are being worn periodically. Items that sit unused for decades can develop problems that go unnoticed until someone finally decides to bring them out, at which point extensive restoration might be required. Looking forward, there are specific tiaras that many people would love to see make appearances. The Strathmore Rose deserves another outing, particularly one that is better documented photographically than its recent appearance. The piece is distinctive and beautiful, and it would be wonderful to see it properly showcased. The Girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, while it was one of Queen Elizabeth's favourites, has not been seen since her passing. Will Queen Camilla wear it, or might it be passed to Catherine? Either option would be interesting to see. The Vladimir tiara remains one of the most dramatic pieces in the collection. Queen Elizabeth wore it frequently, often with the emerald drops rather than the pearl drops. It would be spectacular to see this piece at a major state occasion again. The Burmese ruby tiara, created from rubies given to Queen Elizabeth as a wedding gift, has a touching story behind it and is visually striking. The Delhi Durbar tiara, with its significant historical connections to imperial history, would be fascinating to see worn again, though its size and weight make it a challenging piece. Beyond these more well-known pieces, there are tiaras that have barely been seen in living memory. The Fas Tech Crescent tiara has an unusual design that would be interesting to see in person rather than just in old photographs. Various turquoise pieces exist in the collection, and turquoise tiaras are relatively uncommon, making them particularly noteworthy when they do appear. Queen Mary's bandeau, distinct from the tiara that Meghan wore at her wedding, represents another option. The sapphire bandeau that originally belonged to Princess Marie Feodorovna would be extraordinary to see worn. For Catherine specifically, there are numerous pieces that would suit her style and coloring beautifully. She has proven that she can carry off substantial tiaras like the lover's knot with ease, so she certainly has the presence to wear some of the grander pieces. At the same time, some of the more delicate options might provide interesting variety. The challenge is not finding pieces that would work for her, but rather getting the opportunity to see her in something different. The same applies to Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. She has been a working royal for many years now and regularly attends formal events that require tiaras. Yet she has been largely limited to a relatively small selection of pieces. Given her experience and her position within the family, she could certainly handle wearing more significant tiaras from the collection. Seeing her in some of the pieces that have been hidden away would be a treat for those who follow these events. Queen Camilla herself has many options still to explore. She has worn several different pieces since becoming queen, but there are still many tiaras in the collection that she has not yet worn in public. Each time she reaches for something different, it creates a sense of possibility. If she continues to vary her choices and occasionally selects pieces that break from expected patterns, it will encourage the perception that the old, rigid system is genuinely changing. The challenge is that change in royal protocol tends to happen slowly and somewhat quietly. There are unlikely to be official announcements about new tiara sharing policies. Instead, change will be observable through the choices made at individual events over time. If we see continued variety, if different family members start wearing pieces that were previously associated with others, if long-hidden tiaras start making regular appearances, then we will know that something has shifted. But this will require patience and attention over multiple events and potentially multiple years. There is always the risk of reading too much into any single occurrence. One unexpected tiara choice does not necessarily indicate a complete overhaul of the system. It could simply be that Queen Camilla wanted to wear something different for that particular occasion, with no broader implications. The history of false starts and reverted changes counsels caution about declaring victory prematurely. However, completely dismissing the possibility of change would also be premature. Sometimes significant shifts do begin with small, incremental steps. The broader point is that the British royal family has an incredible resource in their tiara collection. These pieces represent history, artistry, and tradition. They are part of what makes royal ceremonial occasions special and memorable. Using them more extensively would enhance these events and allow more people to appreciate these extraordinary objects. The pieces exist to be worn, to be seen, to be part of the ongoing story of the monarchy. Keeping them locked away seems like a missed opportunity on multiple levels. Whether Queen Camilla's recent choice signals the beginning of meaningful change remains to be seen, but the hope is certainly there that more variety and flexibility might be coming to the British royal tiara landscape.